Hello, and welcome to today's webinar presentation on the topic of scenarios for augmented reality in 2020. My name is Christine Perey, and I'll be delivering today's session for you. I want to begin by thanking the IEEE for hosting today's webinar. Today's presentation is the fifth in a series of webinars designed to inform and raise awareness about augmented reality topics in a vendor-neutral way. In our previous episodes, I focused on the technology of augmented reality, its status in 2014, and its uses in the business world and in urban environments. Today, I'll review a few key concepts I introduced before in order to set the stage, and then I'll be turning my attention toward the future. What do we know about the future of augmented reality? Many people would like to better understand the future so they can plan ahead, be prepared for it when it arrives. It's not helpful to just shrug our shoulders and raise our hands saying, hey, we don't know. There are tools out there, though, we can use to guide us and help better define the future. I'll be sharing with you the concept of scenario planning. I'll describe a process that began in early 2014 and the 4 scenarios that process produced. These are scenarios in which the actors use augmented reality as part of their big data and cloud-based information services. These scenarios give us insights into how AR might be integrated into the lives of the citizen in the year 2020. Before I get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how to participate in today's session. If you've joined today's webinar listening through your computer speaker system, by default, then this means that you'll be able to hear the presentation without dialing in. If you would like to call in using your telephone, just locate your audio pane, select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code for today's session will then be displayed. Finally, you'll have the ability to ask questions at the end using the WebEx chat feature. Simply type in your question to David Stankiewicz, our host, and click Send. At the end of the presentation, I'll get to as many of your questions as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. I've been a consultant here in the area of augmented reality for quite a few years, and I'd like to tell you that what I do is research, and on top of that research and those landscapes that I see, I build initiatives and animate and organize communities and provide consulting services. And these services and activities inform what you're going to be hearing about today. I've been focusing on augmented reality because augmented reality is a new user experience. It enhances our experience of the world around us. By using sensors such as cameras and geospatial positioning sensors like GPS and compass, and accelerometer, and using microphones and other sensors in our devices, we can combine the physical world with the digital content, and very often involves some type of a database or a network and some infrastructure components. All these things together focus on the user. The user is in the middle of augmented reality, and that user's perceptions of reality are altered because the information is synchronized. They might look something like this. For example, we're looking outside over the Lake Geneva, and the augmented reality system takes the readings from the sensors of the smartphone, sends them up into the cloud, finds the same kinds of data, the data that was associated with those readings before, and brings back text, images, graphics, 3D objects, maybe animations, and overlays those on the real world. In this scenario, I've stepped through several times before, so I invite you to go back and review those past episodes. You can get more about the basics and these concepts by watching our introductory webcast, and then there are other topics that we have covered on this screen. Please do consult the webinar page. Today I'm going to be focusing on these scenarios for the future. And if you think that 2020 is far into the future, Some people think it's too far. Others say it's not far enough. But we chose it because of it sounds kind of symbolically important date, and also because about 5 years into the future is a reasonable time to use a method that I'm going to be describing to you today. So here's the question, if you want to know what's going to happen in 5 years, how do you do that? We don't have many working crystal balls. People have crystal balls, but they don't necessarily tell you the future. They don't necessarily answer the questions you have, such as, what's going to be the best use, and what are the issues that have to be addressed, and will the technologies go mainstream? Are there risks? What are the uncertainties that we need to live with? Who can answer those questions? Well, one of the ways people do it is that they look at the past. They look at patterns from the past, telecommunication services, the internet, the web. There are many things that we can look at in the past and try to detect patterns and predict how the future will look. We also rely heavily on authors and people who write scripts for movies, and because they tell stories about people who live in the future. And professionally, we turn to people whose job it is to think about and to look into the future, analysts, strategists, investors who want to know where they're going to get a return on their money in the future. One of the tools that strategists have at their disposal is called scenario planning. And this is a very broad set of techniques, and it takes a very consistent approach. The method that I've chosen is one that has been developed by a gentleman whose name is Woody Wade, and he's written this book, The Scenario Planning Field Guide to the Future. I'll be telling you more about what Mr. Wade provides. So I'll start with these high-level introductory concepts. One thing we really know is where we are now, who we are, what's going on around us is pretty easy to document. And we know where we were a year ago, so we can draw a line between where we were last year, where we are presently, and then we take that line and just extend it into the future and say, here, how does that look? A few years from now, it'll be the straight line. We'll be continuing in the direction that we started with. And the more time you look back, the stronger people feel about this direction of the line and how straight it should be. So it looks a little symbolically like this road, right? There are little jigs and jags in the road, but fundamentally it's a straight road, and it's taking us up into the mountains. And if you think about it symbolically, it looks a bit like this. It says, well, here we are a few years from now. We'll probably be where we thought we would be, and we wouldn't be unhappy with that. But what if we were a little bit to the left or above, a little higher, our revenues were higher, or some other metric we chose to measure would be higher, or we might find that measuring ourselves and our performance in a few years, we might be a little bit below our expectations. And so if you come back to this graphic, this is kind of what it would look like, right? It's a straight road, and you think you expect that you're going to be staying on that road. But what if you moved a bit and you were able to get higher and get up on the mountains to the left? And what if you ended up being further to the right? So symbolically, this is kind of what we all do by nature. It is just the way we like to think about things. And so we expect that there will be a range of possibilities out there in the future, out there in the distance. So coming back to my framework and this conceptual figure, it's a bit like this. So we can understand that there are going to be things that won't go perfectly or exactly as planned. There will be some deviation, and that might be due, for example, to a change in political power. There might be new management ideas that are introduced in our company or in our industry. They might start to have an impact on us. There might be some, war or conflict at a geopolitical level that may dampen enthusiasm for what it is we offer. There might be fear or other kinds of societal attitudes that would come into play and reduce our performance. There might be low inflation and recovery from an economic downturn. So we can just keep adding on these different factors that we can evaluate and think about in order to imagine the different scenarios in the future. So now let's take a look at these. And as you see the way this is sort of lined up, all these new developments lined up into the future, the farther we go into the future, the less we know about how important, what's the amplitude of those arrows, how much will they impact our plans. So with this thinking in mind, with a lot of factors that we can't predict, this is kind of what it looks like. We know what we know better what's happening in the lower range, near-term range of possibilities, and the cone or the range of possibilities as we get further into the future gets larger. This is kind of the basic concept now. And scenario planning gives you a method by which you can begin to consider and describe what could these different landscapes, the multiple landscapes, very diverse landscapes look like in the future. We're not predicting the future, but we're exploring the different scenarios that are possible. And we do this, and it's very valuable to be able to do it graphically by visualizing alternatives and making them really graphical. So that's what this technique does. So in order to get to that range of possibilities in these scenarios out in the future, we try to look at the driving forces that will affect our technology and the development of the augmented reality ecosystem. Well, what are the kinds of political factors that might impact the development of augmented reality? Might be people saying, having policy and legislation, putting those in place to either encourage or discourage the use of some component. There could also be some type of an economic impact. The price of the technology or the devices, the smartphones and eyewear might drop really quickly for factors that we don't know about, but that is a driving force. More people would purchase the systems and would purchase the content and the tools if they were cheaper. What are some other economic impacts? There's direct impacts and there's indirect impacts. So there might be things that change the likelihood of people driving with driverless cars. If the driverless car has the augmented reality technology embedded into it, then I'm paying only one price. But I don't control, and it's not really within the scope of this exercise to think about the market for those other technologies that would include augmented reality. Then we can think about societal factors that could impact the adoption or the low appetite. Maybe people are afraid, they're uncertain about where you're using the information that's captured with their camera. We've talked about this in a past webinar. People may also find it very acceptable to have wearable computing and many sensors attached to them and find that that's just the way they want to live. So it's really about lifestyles and societal values. And then, of course, there's many technological factors that are direct and indirect that would impact the growth of augmented reality. We've talked about some of those in the past. Examples are the technological algorithms that detect faces or that detect other kinds of objects. And if there's a breakthrough, that could make a big impact on the suitability of the augmented reality solutions. We might also have people who are, the networks might get much, much more robust, and that content would be distributed in a different way and more appealing. So it's a lot of technological factors. And so what we do is we brainstorm those lists, and we just get many, 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 many factors, the driving factors. You don't organize them at all except maybe by those 4 groups that I mentioned. And then you take the different factors that you brainstormed and you ask yourself, is this factor that I've identified going to have a big impact, or, is it a low impact? Is the impact high or low? And if it's low, then you say all that secondary elements. You put all of those driving factors that are likely to have a low impact and put them into the bottom half of this figure. Then you look and you say, well, what are some things that could have a high impact, but I'm sure they're going to happen? So I'm certain. They have a low uncertainty. They have a high certainty. So you choose those driving factors that you are very, very comfortable will happen and have high impact, and you put them into this box we call the predetermined elements. What that leaves you is the box in which you have both high impact and a high uncertainty, and you're really, really not sure what will happen if they come about. They are called the critical uncertainties. So using this method and categorizing the driving factors in the method I've just described as a group allows people to come down to identifying these critical uncertainties and going forward with those. That's the background. That's Woody Wade's technique for scenario planning, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But now I'd like to tell you about this project that I've been involved in with the support of the IEEE Standards Association. The IEEE Standards Association sponsored 2 workshops, and we gathered experts, some of whom were experts in augmented reality, others might be experts in security and networking technologies, mobile technologies, and together we brainstormed all the driving factors. We classified things in the different categories along the axes of impact and uncertainty, and then we had to choose. It's extremely difficult, but at the end of several hours, we had to shape and choose 2 most critical uncertainties. And by putting those together, those 2 critical uncertainties, they generated and we named 4 scenarios for augmented reality in 2020. This process, this workflow was repeated with a different set of experts in a different place the following week. So these were workshops conducted in the first quarter of 2014. One of the panels, one of the workshops, decided that a critical uncertainty was utility. Will augmented reality really be useful, and to whom? And so for one side we said there's a scenario we can imagine where it's primarily useful for enterprise users for lots of reasons. And then there's another end of this extreme uncertainty that is primarily used for individuals, consumers, people like us who are using augmented reality to enhance our lifestyle. And another axis, the same group of people suggested, is that there would be risks and uncertainty around implementation of legislation, laws, or policies that would protect the user or enterprise data. And these are things that we thought, oh, this would be very high impact on augmented reality success. With these, we said, well, there might be well-implemented systems and there might be no protection, and there are many dangers when the data is in AR view. This matrix, these 2 axes, defined 4 quadrants, and in each one we named and discussed a scenario. The second group of people who did the same procedure a week later described slightly different axes, but as you'll see when I describe them, they are not that far apart. One of them is that the degree to which the technology matures will work well in an uncontrolled environment. That means an environment we don't know a lot about. It's never been seen by the AR system before. And so one end of this uncertainty is that it will not work in uncontrolled environment. In other words, it will only work in controlled environments, in highly controlled environments like you might find in an enterprise. The other end of the extreme is it works well enough without a high investment in pre-recognized mapped environments. So this is interesting that we have this, it turns out that the technologies that could work well enough without a high investment would be a lower cost set of technologies, more appealing to individuals, consumers, and so forth. But they wouldn't be highly reliable because there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of uncertainty still in those experiences and the data that the sensors collect. On the left-hand side of this axis, you'd see experiences that were in a controlled enterprise environment that had invested a lot of time into measuring things and making sure all those sensors were correctly calibrated. The other axis that this group chose is an uncertainty around the return on investment, or what we call the economic case for augmented reality. And there are two ends of this extreme axis. One is that there are many, many use cases for which the return on investment is high or good. And then their other end is that, it's expensive, sometimes it's useful, and sometimes it's not justifiable. Again, these two axes generated 4 scenarios which we named and described. After that, after these workshops, I merged the outcomes, and then I composed some vignettes for people, characters that I imagined in these different roles in the year 2020. And I created one story for each of the 4 scenarios. I collaborated with professional artists, and I described the scenarios to them, and we produced illustrations. And then after the illustrations and the discussions with the artists, we rewrote the story. The story theme stayed very much the same, but some of the factors, some of the elements had changed in order to make them more real and more vivid and to accompany the illustrations. So as you saw, there was these 2 axes, and I like to call the top scenarios, the scenarios that are above the horizontal axis, the Rosy scenarios, and I call those that are below the horizontal axis the somber or dark scenarios. So the bright scenarios are very positive. Let's go through those. I'm going to spend 5 minutes telling you about each one of those scenarios. Well, meet Mark. He works at a manufacturing plant, an automotive company, and it's really advanced. There are lots of robots and just a few people. So in this case, Mark, he's come to work, and today he's gotten an assignment. He's picked up his assignment. He's going to be testing. He's training, by the way, to become a quality inspector. He's training, and he's been assigned a task to test out some of the latest technologies and participate in some trials so we can determine how the accuracy and the value of providing these AR-assisted systems will benefit the company. There's 2 systems. There's an AR-assisted training system and an inspection system, and they're combined in this case. He'll examine the quality of some robotically installed brake systems, and he'll check them against the 3D models. Here comes Mark. So he's got his glasses on. As you can see, he has a head-mounted displays, and these the displays are speaking. They're communicating, as you'll see in a moment. These specially designed AR-assisted brake inspection systems are really expensive, and they'll be, if they're effective, as these preliminary tests in the lab have shown, then the company will be able to justify deploying them in other use cases and where other inspection procedures are slow or can't be performed by robots. So far, Mark's experience is that the latest model works only when his badge is turned on and properly configured for the new network. So there's a network component here. His learning record store and the fully integrated workflow management systems are both tracking his every move. Since the wearable technology is only in beta, that is, it's not fully integrated with the highly secure data management system and warehouse operations, he has to take some special, so he pushed on the interface there and out popped the brake assembly. And if he needs any help with this, he's going to have to look up a name in the test system in order to call the supervisor, and the supervisor might be able to see through his glasses. These systems are also used to enforce compliance with corporate safety policy. So surrounding the plant and in the vehicles that the employees use when they're on the plant, on the campus of the company, there are a lot of what we call smart zones that are completely wired with sensors, and where the technical documentation is required by the Office of Safety is being completely and continuously updated with activity reports that are generated by using the SafeAR compatible system. So I just made up the name of these SafeAR compatible systems. The latest wearable technology that Mark is using is much higher performance than the previous hardware. Wherever Mark is working on a new procedure or with a new instrument on the job, the systems that compare his learning records with the technical documentation, they automatically understand the context, and they give prompts such as the instructions that he's received, to make sure that his performance complies with the company policy. So he glances around the plant. He's looking around. He's distracted, right? And he notices that the 3D models that are detailed around him are really well aligned with the real world. They're so well aligned that he can't distinguish the digital from the physical representation. And the system is providing much higher quality tracking than the experiences he's been accustomed to. Mark's supervisor, John, he's approaching on the plant safety. He's accompanied by the safety supervisor. So John asks, "When will we report our findings about these new systems?" John replies, "We're still testing a new algorithm for activity streams and 3D spatial analysis. It requires a slightly heavier battery pack, but if you want to test it, you'll need to just sign a security and safety agreement, and you can try it on. Your feedback would be really valuable," says John. At the end of his shift, Mark puts his SafeAR glasses into their charging case and puts on his own personal Sony smart glasses. They point his way out to the station where he'll be taking the next shuttle bus into town. There's a message waiting for him on his eyewear from his wife, asking him if he'll pick up their son. He listens to her voice, and then he's going to have a chance to talk with his son about the newest installment of a game. This game uses digital basketball hoops out in the public space and a special glove for sensing the player's shots using a digital basketball. So the technology that can be used in games is very similar to that would be used in enterprises, and it has gloves and glasses. And Mark can use these at work. He's really experienced with them. So he gets good scores, and the son loves being on Mark's team. Okay, that's the first scenario. The second scenario I'm going to talk to you about has to do with remember I said that there are people who would use augmented reality in daily life. Well, even in 2020, it won't be available just for everybody. It'll be more for people who are of a higher income, let's say. So I'm going to talk to you and explain to you a story about this woman. This is Anne. She's a young and aspiring professional. She just got a job as the executive assistant to a CEO in a downtown law firm. And she's visiting a world-class art museum during her lunch break. She's trying to get a little culture. She brought along with her the full reality tablet that was issued to her by her company's IT department. And she registered it on the local network to be able to enjoy and learn the vision that these new artists have about their work. In the short time she has available before riding down the escalator, that's the escalator in front of her, down to the cafeteria at the museum, she focuses on the light fixture over the atrium. Beautiful spinning balls start to appear and in her earpiece, she hears the voice of the artist describing the relationship between these and space travel. Space travel, what do we know about space travel? Still a long ways out in 2020, but some of the innovations that are been made for space travel are already available for some professionals and prosumers, people who are willing to pay. So the sensor-rich and AR-assisted technology lifestyle platforms that Anne and her partner are trying out at home are examples of these new platforms. The components that Anne puts on in the morning measure her activity levels. They download the day's agenda so that she can see it in the integrated eyewear. The system performs an analysis of her agenda and kind of estimates how much energy she's going to use. The platform's readings combine all these things in the cloud, and they then guide her through a workout that's suitable for her anticipated activities later in the day. As Anne's going down to lunch, she sees on her tablet that one of her former classmates is also in the museum. So she follows an AR-assisted navigation through the new performing arts wing of the complex. As she walks along, she just glances over and looks at the stage in the new performing arts wing, and she uses the menu to project different points of view on her glasses. She can hear how the instruments will sound and the actors' voices from different parts of the theater, whether she's on the balcony or on the ground floor seats. Okay, now Anne meets her friend, and she chooses a fresh fruit beverage that her tracking platform, her health tracking platform, has highlighted on the virtual menu. And Anne places her order and takes her glasses off to talk with her friend. Even though she's been told that all the privacy settings are bulletproof and she's unaware of any incidents of cybercrime, she remembers rumors going around that maybe she doesn't fully trust that her new tablet from her employer isn't somehow communicating with her personal wearable technologies. Got to be careful. After work, Anne picks up her husband at the commuter access point, and they stop by the home maintenance system repair shop on their way. The service person that came to the apartment last week used an AR-assisted diagnostic program that seemed to indicate hardware failure in one of the motors. The system's still under warranty, and immediate replacement was recommended in order to avoid failure in other household systems. Anne's husband uses the automatically loaded AR-assisted guidance system to install the replacement part while Anne prepares dinner. And after dinner, Anne decides that her wardrobe needs a few upgrades. Maybe her friend was wearing a beautiful dress. She uses the AR-assisted mirror mounted in the window of her new apartment and the Macy's catalog service to try on some dresses made of new solar capture and energy storage fabrics. Tomorrow morning, the model dress in her budget that she preferred will be delivered in her size to her front door. Sounds idyllic. What a great life. Augmented reality is helping life in so many different ways. Now let's look at the darker scenarios for some time. Well, it begins with this gentleman. He's been a victim of a shooting, and we're just not sure exactly, what that's all about. But I want to highlight for you that the scenarios that we were talking about were very much emphasizing increased quality inspection, quality of life, certainly more controlled environment in the enterprise, but then an uncontrolled environment in the home, meaning in the residence we're using augmented reality all the time, but maybe not exactly the way it was designed. So let's learn about this shooting victim. His name is John, too. So he's being taken to the hospital to undergo surgery and remove the bullet from his torso. He's very lucky. The bullet has removed all of his vital organs. Otherwise, you wouldn't have him be part of our scenario. This is the room. So since the shooting, John has recovered consciousness, and he'll be moved out of the intensive care unit into this room that we're looking at in the internal medicine ward. The room in which he'll soon be seeing the surgeon has all the latest technologies. Now, he's familiar with the AR-assisted systems because he has AR at home in his entertainment unit. He is a volunteer emergency responder, so he's installed some situational analysis training onto his entertainment system. although it says very clearly in the instructions of the training system that you should not use them for any other purposes. He also plays highly immersive first-person shooter video games with the same platform. Oh no, I think you can see where this is heading. While their appetite for AR-assisted services has been whet, consumers ignore the policies and are very vulnerable to predatory behaviors of others. Only the week before, it was revealed that nearly 70% of the users' AR-assisted displays have not been following the recommended practices when using financial services and door entry codes, so they could get hacked. As a result of his high scores in the multiplayer online games, his brazen macho attitude, there are people who have targeted John in real life. As soon as he woke up from surgery, there were detectives from the Cybercrimes Division who were questioning John about his accounts in these multiplayer online games. But he only ever sees the page alias, and he doesn't know their real names. While John's in the bathroom, as he is now, the medical technician sets up the AR-assisted patient evaluation system and uploads his charts with the details of all his vitals. When the doctor arrives, this is the doctor with a white coat that looks a lot like Mark, but don't worry, it's not the same guy. His augmented reality system is going to be used to show the observations that are generated by sensors. The surgeons embedded and installed sensors on John's skin and in his body, and John will need to stand so that the doctor can walk around him and see the overlay on his spleen and other organs without interference. So he's already, been up, he's been to the bathroom, and now the surgeon is going to walk around him. The surgeon's puzzled by what he's seeing and wonders what could be causing these anomalous readings. Not the glow, it's something more. He wishes the hospital offered more training on the use of the AR-assisted patient evaluation system, or would upgrade their existing system so he could control the user interaction himself from his head-mounted display. He asks the medical technician to change modes so he can see another view. In some settings, the use of AR-assisted systems is ahead of the policies, and sometimes it's behind the policies. There's a high risk that there will be problems due to these inconsistencies. And until there's greater benefit for investors as well as users, the nurses and patients will continue to be frustrated and exposed to the inherent shortcomings these systems have. So while they're doing the exam, a call comes in and announces that the public security advisor that's coming to see John will be late. He's going to be training John on how to use his home cybersecurity system. But there's so much demand for this poor gentleman. There's so many people who don't understand the issues and the dangers they're putting themselves in that it takes a long time for him to do his job. Information is everywhere, but no one wants to change their behavior, and some, like John, may be paying the price. Dark, but not life-threatening today, right? He survived this. Well, here's a much darker scenario. In this scenario, the economic case, the AR is not clearly suggested for all use cases, but it has gotten into the hands of some of the wrong people. We are in 2020, and law enforcement and emergency responders and things like that are targeted by people who use AR. Well, here we are. It's the dawn of the driverless automobile era. We'll be hearing more about what happens in that era. Many of the manual control systems on the car still look like those of 2015, but their use is optional. Some people have completely forgotten how to drive. Who needs to drive, they think? The cars, and it seems all the machines in daily use and the buildings in which we work and live are all packed with sensors connected to cloud services. But in many parts of the world where companies and communities were early to implement and adopt connected machines and machine-to-machine systems, there are serious political, economic, and social problems. People feel that they've not only lost their privacy, but they may have lost their liberty as well. No one knows who is evil and who to trust. is a global terrorist organization targeting those who are using advanced AR systems for data visualization. They've got an underground network and they're violent. During the day, everything appears to be normal, but behind the scenes, businesses are victims of increasing corporate espionage around the world. Despite enormous investments in secure research programs, it seems that nothing is able to protect these business secrets once the enterprise IT systems are invaded by these hackers. We continue to develop, so someone says, president of a company makes a bold statement saying that they continue to develop highly efficient, low-error enablers for augmented reality. They're trying to reassure their customers that their engineers are following the strictest safety and security precautions to ensure a high degree of quality. But they're still, they're confident, and the companies are boasting. Well, let's just go a little later. It's now become night. Bill's going home from the office, and his company provided bulletproof, driverless, augmented reality-assisted car. There's going to be a holographic projection system that's embedded. As you can see, there's a ball on the dashboard and one above the windshield. And they're going to be able to display to him what's happening around the world, so he can see not only what's happening in the buildings nearby, but also he can see through the buildings. And when he turns on the augmented reality holographic display, seems tonight is particularly bad. Maybe it's because the AR 2020 report published earlier in the day revealed just how much the security violations have been running rampant. So people who are using augmented reality are really exposing their personal data and business data. And there's a section of the report that says there have been many, many breaches in data security. People feel helpless and scared. They're taking to the streets to communicate their frustration. So there's, of course, law enforcement, but there's a lot of people in chaos, and there's fire, mayhem. Many are jobless because thousands of companies in this area are providing AR-assisted data sets, and they're out of work. They've had to close. They've moved elsewhere in the world, and this is really a problem economically. Fear, uncertainty, and risk are very high in this scenario, and everyone wants to blame someone else. How could this have been prevented? That wraps up the fourth of the four scenarios, and I call this one the skeletons of once great empires. So what's next? What are we going to do with these scenarios? Well, first of all, I'd like to invite you to get involved. Visit this page, the IEEE Standards webpage, on which we have more information, and you can read the post-workshop report. This was a report prepared in the second quarter of this year. You can send us your thoughts about that report and your feedback about this webinar, and you can also use some of these ideas to produce and submit to us your illustrations, animations, and videos that would help us to tell the story more deeply and explore some of these factors. Over the next few months, we're going to continue the development of the scenarios. We're going to study and create a list of possible signposts that we would be able to detect in advance when a scenario is coming about. We'll continue to publish papers, some white papers, and share those with the public. And we encourage companies to develop their own strategic responses based on these four scenarios. You can also adopt this technique, this method of scenario planning. You can learn more about it from this book or from the internet, and you can perform this exercise in your own organization, maybe not about augmented reality, but might be about another topic that's important to your company's future. So to summarize today's webinar, I've talked to you about the scenarios we've developed with experts for AR in 2020. And I think you saw how dramatically different they are. Well, I also think the take-home message is that nobody knows really what the future holds, but we better prepare ourselves and have some strategies for mitigating bad things and taking advantage of new opportunities. The scenario planning method's well proven in preparing us for the future, and the IEEE Standards Association is also investing in the future of augmented reality. You could get involved with the IEEE's project on the AR in 2020 scenarios and begin planning for your future as well. I think this pretty much wraps up the prepared remarks that I had for today. I want to tell you before we go to the questions about some other webinars that we're working on and developing for you in the near future this fall. Please stay tuned and do attend some of our webinars about these topics, such as augmented reality in health and wellness, also augmented reality in the enterprise setting, such as in manufacturing, so that people could begin using augmented reality to increase the quality and increase productivity on manufacturing shop floor. We'll also be introducing you to the concepts of open and interoperable augmented reality. So that's all I have for today. David, thank you very much for hosting, and are there any questions from our audience?
Thanks, Christine. Great job today. Another great session. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to attend our webinar on scenarios for AR in 2020. We had 3 questions come through from audience participation. Without further ado, and in no particular order, the first question, Christine, is this process that you used, called scenario planning, is it a new process, a new concept? And where can I learn more about it?
Okay. Actually, it's very interesting. It was developed originally by Shell Oil, the Dutch headquarters of Shell Oil. Back in the 70s, in the early 70s, you might remember that there was an oil crisis, and they was a Middle East embargo and things, and some planners, some strategists decided that what they needed to do in order to prepare themselves for the future was to explore some scenarios and develop some possible futures. And then they also developed some plans for how to respond if these different futures came about, and they put them in a drawer. And sure enough, a few years later, the scenario signposts that they'd set out for themselves started to be visible and detectable. And so they pulled out their strategies and were able to much more quickly respond to the situation. So it is something that's been tested, and it's almost, more than 40 years old or thereabouts. So it's, and there's a lot of information on the internet. There are symposiums and books and things like that. So I do encourage you to learn more about that and use it internally.
All right. Thanks, Christine. Next question. In your scenario about modern life, you mentioned an AR-assisted mirror. Are those available already today?
Sure. The AR-assisted mirrors, I've seen them on YouTube videos. I've seen them in trade shows for demonstration purposes, but I've never seen a company actually offer a full-length mirror or window that acts like this. What I have seen are several examples. There's some examples that were, in some cases 3 or 4 years old. We call them the try-it-on augmented reality use case. So early on, there were examples where you could try on eyewear for, the glasses frames. And it really wasn't a mirror. What it was using a desktop computer, the camera, a webcam pointed at you. It would track the face, and then you could choose the glasses frames that you want to put on. Those were 3D models, and they would track the movement of your head so that the glasses always stayed in position. You could then ask other people what they thought, or you could look at many more models of frames than you would normally see in one retail store. Then there have been other examples using a desktop computer or a kiosk. Again, software that you download or a service. I remember there was a company that did one called I think it was called like the Barbie showroom or the Barbie's closet, and you could go in a trade show or maybe at a store and try on the costumes. Young girls might go in there and dress up themselves. Just this year, L'Oreal released a piece of software that you can use on a computer that allows you to to test out different kinds of makeup that you might want to purchase, makeup for your eyes or your color for lipsticks and so forth. And so you should go and look at the L'Oreal website and look up face and augmented reality, and I'm sure you'll be able to find that. And they might expand that, you could imagine, to other products. I've also seen an example of using augmented reality for trying out different haircuts. So before you go to the stylist to get your hair cut, you might want to try different styles, and that would be, and then you could print that out or save the image and send it in advance and ask for that kind of haircut. So it does exist. I haven't seen the full-length ones, and I haven't seen the integration with a catalog from a well-known brand, but there are other brands that are using this.
Okay, 2 more questions to tackle because another one just poured in, Christine. And let's start with this one because it gets me rather excited. Your Skeletons of Empire scenario is extremely dark. Do you think it's possible that people will not want to use connected technologies in the future out of fear?
Well, David, when I was writing this and thinking about it, I thought about there's some movies, quite a few movies about the future, and I've just seen some earlier this year that depict a very apocalyptic future where our technologies have somehow turned against us. Well, this isn't quite that bad. It's not saying that the technologies have a mind of their own and they're diabolical, but it is saying that the people can use technologies in ways that are harmful to others. And I think that we can see that today. There's problems in security, problems with people putting too much information on the internet about themselves, and then having financial impacts or health impacts. We can imagine people that it would perhaps become a very, very big problem and something to monitor. So I think the scenario is not out of the realm of possibilities, and there are also issues around weight of these technologies. People might also be fearful about cancer and radiation and other rumors that are undocumented about the negative impacts of having technologies on you all the time. So I think that it's important to think about. It's important not to dismiss these possibilities and assume that the world is all perfect and we live in some ideal, universe.
Well said. Okay, Christine, last question, and then I will let you wrap things up and take us out. Final question is about your first scenario. You mentioned the learning record store. Is that something that is specific to AR, or was it solely invented for the purpose of this particular scenario in this webinar?
Actually, great question. I'm very excited someone picked up on that because learning record stores, something fairly new and modern. It was a concept that was introduced about 3 years ago in 2011 pertaining to distributed learning, online learning, instructional design. And it was proposed as part of an architecture that tracks what people are interacting with when they're in a training or learning scenario. So there very much is a software database and associated software with that database that is called a learning record store. You can look that up and find more information about it. So it was not designed or invented by me for this scenario. However, I am working with other people on the subject of the architecture that tracks what people are doing in augmented reality and stores it in a way that we can return to it, make analyses about the interaction, and maybe record the performance improvements or learn if we need to change the augmented reality experiences. So the architecture that uses learning records, and that is the higher level terminology, is called the Experience API. The Experience API is abbreviated lowercase x, capital A, capital P, capital I. And I'm working together with some instructional design experts on some papers that will explain how XAPI and augmented reality can be used hand in hand. So you might want to take a look on that on the internet as well and try to do some research about XAPI, and you might be able to find the pages that we've developed about AR and XAPI. It's part of the Actionable Data Book activity that's an IEEE Industry Connections program started about a year ago. So that's a long answer to your quick question. I'm very glad that someone detected that. This concludes today's webinar presentation, and thank you for your time and participation. Please tune in for the next episode in our AR in Your Future series. It'll take place on Thursday, September 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern. The IEEE is hosting, and I'll be moderating a live Google Hangout panel discussion on one of the AR in 2020 scenarios. A panel of experts will share their opinions on one of these preliminary scenarios, and we'll learn how AR scenario and scenario planning can help businesses that are not using AR in industry today. For more information on viewing that session, please visit the IEEE Standards Association Google Plus page. Thank you again to the IEEE for giving me the opportunity to bring you today's webinar. Have a great day, everyone.